Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to go over the best camera settings for the Phantom 4 Pro. In the video today, I'm going to cover not only the best physical settings for those, but that'll include the color profile that I recommend. But I'm also going to walk you through the color profiles that have been introduced, the film color profiles, which are pretty interesting, pretty nice. I'm also going to walk you through a little bit of the DJI Go 4 app, because best camera settings also have to do with tweaking a few things within the app to get best results for your footage. So it's not just about the physical camera settings, it's literally about the camera settings within the app and a couple of minor things that you can do that'll help your footage look fantastic. I'm also going to go over some settings suggestions for people who do not want to do post-color work, people that just want to take their bird out, fly it, and not have to do any kind of tampering with the footage or color correction at all. Quick caveat about this video. This video and the settings that I've used and the test footage that I've shot is all shot with the H.264 codec. To make a long story short, the H.265 codec still have some bugs to work out, so it's a little bit more difficult to work with. The other thing I want to make very obvious is that you do still need ND filters. I made a comment in the earlier video that it lessened the need for ND filters since the f-stop on the Phantom 4 Pro can be pushed up to f11, which reduces a lot of that light that comes in the camera. But make no mistake, you definitely still need ND filters for the Phantom 4 Pro. The setting on the Phantom 4 Pro that I'm recommending is the Cine profile. I think the D-Log profile that I've used so much with the Phantom 3 is still just too muddy. I really think it's hard to work with it in post, and Cinelike seems to give a little bit more leeway and wiggle room in post. The subsettings I'm recommending for Cine D are sharpness at -1, contrast at -3, and saturation or color at -2. So we're going to start now by booting up the Phantom 4 Pro and taking a look at the app. Okay, let's get started with the DJI Go 4 app. So we enter the device. Okay, before we get to specific camera settings, let's go over a few things that are very important in getting great footage. We want to go to the very top and click on the little icon of the quad at the very top center to bring up the menus. Then go down to the bottom left hand where you see that little camera image toward the bottom center of the page. Tap that. The first thing you want to do after calibrating and setting the quad back on the ground is click Gimbal Auto Calibration. Do this every time when you're starting new on a flight for the first time that day. This will help tremendously with combating that gimbal drift that you see sometimes people's footage has, where the quad is like taking a turn and then all of a sudden the horizon line is not level anymore. A lot of the times I forget to do this, and I'll notice that my gimbal has a tougher time recovering from a turn and going back to true level. So gimbal auto calibration really helps with that. And I also click the button right above that that says adjust gimbal roll. I keep that up on my screen so I can make certain little tweaks and settings as the bird flies. This way, this is a great tool to have where you can easily tweak your horizon line to make sure it's nice and level. Okay, we're going to go back into those same settings, and then we're going to click on the camera again, and then we're going to go to advanced settings. Under advanced settings, this is one of the features that I love the most, and it's the third one down, gimbal pitch smoothness 0 to 30. I set mine to 20, and what this does is it allows the camera to ease in to the position instead of the camera tilting down and then stopping abruptly, or tilting up and stopping abruptly. What this allows is for the camera to, when you start tilting the camera and then let go of the tilt wheel, it'll ease into that shot and stop. Very smooth and very professional looking. Same for tilting back up. So I set this to 20. I found that's kind of the sweet spot for me. You guys can play around and see what works best for you. But there's nothing worse than watching a video and someone's panning up on this beautiful shot, and all of a sudden the camera just clicks and stops, without easing into the shot. So this helps with that tremendously. All right, we're going to go back out, and now we're going to go to the custom camera settings, and that's over on the right underneath the record button. It's those 3 lines with 3 dots. So we're going to select that. Right out of the gate, what I do is I select the M. It's set on auto, but I shoot everything manual, so I would recommend everyone selecting that by clicking on the M. Then I'm going to select the camera image in the middle of this tiny menu. Set my white balance to one of the preset white balance settings here. Usually I'm either on sunny or cloudy. Custom is really good to use too if you want to tweak a little bit of your color. You want it a little less blue, a little less yellow, but I found that the the presets for sunny and cloudy work just fantastic. The other ones, incandescent and fluorescent, that's for indoor shooting. You would never use incandescent or fluorescent outside for any reason whatsoever. So sunny and cloudy should cover you. And you always want to use a custom white balance setting. Never use auto. And the reason is, as the scene changes, the whole color temperature of your shot could change. So you don't want to be shooting something and have this gorgeous warm image, and then say you tilt the camera toward the ground, then everything kind of goes blue. And that's because the color balance is on auto, or the white balance is on auto, and it's correcting for that color change or color shift in the image. So you always want to use a manual white balance set, and these presets are fun to use also. We'll go back and we're going to go to color. And for color, I use D-Cinelike, the very top there. That's my favorite one. None and TrueColor to me are a little bit too contrasty. I don't even really mess with, I've tested a little bit with those, but I don't mess with them. I think that None and TrueColor, I'm not sure why TrueColor is called TrueColor, because it's really not. It's a little bit harsh looking to me. And None is just, I don't know, it's kind of a throwaway to me. It's just not a preference of mine. As others may feel differently, and that's great, but that's just my kind of preference. So I use Cinelike there. And then let's go to style. This is the important place to visit. Under style, you see down at the bottom, you've got custom. Under custom, under that first image, or that first icon there, I set this to -1, okay? And that's because it keeps that sharpness down, it keeps the image from being too crispy, and it also fights moiré and aliasing. The second setting there is for contrast. I take that all the way down to -3. That way I protect the tonality of my shot, and it gives a smoother overall image, protecting the dynamic range of the shot, which makes it much easier to grade in post. And then finally, the saturation color. I take that down to -2 for the same reasons kind of that I do for the contrast. So it's not so harsh looking. Oversaturated footage can actually reveal artifacts much quicker and much easier than footage that's shot with a decent saturation. So that's the settings for that. Okay, let's get back out here and let's see what else we need to look at. Under the gear icon, I rarely use the histogram simply because I can kind of look at the image on the iPad and kind of tell if it's hot or a little bit dark, because I use the next one down, the overexposure warning. That's fantastic. I leave that on. What happens with the overexposure warning is you get what's called zebras. So that means you'll see these flashing stripes in areas that are absolutely blown out. That's the camera's way of telling you, hey, you are absolutely blowing out this one area, just an FYI if you want to adjust your exposure. The grid, I turn on grid lines, the basic rule of thirds grid lines. And the reason for that is primarily because of the horizon line. With these grid lines on, it's very easy to tell if my horizon line is off level. So I keep that on just to maintain those, and it helps too if you're flying close to any kind of architectural structures. You can use those lines to make sure that your shot is perpendicular, your gimbal's not drifting or off level. So let's talk about sharpness for a second. The sharpness on the Phantom 4 Pro is much different than in the past. Usually zero was way too sharp and crispy for me. But this time around, they've actually they've tamed it down a little bit. So -1 can get you in the ballpark of what you need as far as sharpness that's clean enough where you can push it up a little bit in post if you want to. But just a side note for you guys, the reason that you don't want your video to be over sharpened is because when it's over sharpened, not only does it have a kind of a crispy, unrealistic look to it, but over-sharpened footage also exaggerates two things that we fight often in our footage, and that is aliasing and moiré. Moiré is caused by a fine pattern. Say when you're filming something like a rooftop, the shingles on a rooftop that create this pattern, or bricks on the side of a building that create a fine pattern. And you probably noticed this in your footage. There's this sort of subtle dancing pattern on the side of, say, like a brick wall or the shingles on a rooftop. That's moiré, and that's because your camera has a little bit too much sharpening. Taking the sharpness down to -1, like I'm recommending, helps tremendously with that. The other thing is aliasing. Aliasing happens when there's supposed to be a fine continuous line. A good example is like fence lines, long rows of fencing, or power lines, things like that that should have a beautiful continuous line. Aliasing happens when that line is broken into almost little stair steps. Instead of a beautiful continuous line, you get these tiny little stair steps. That's aliasing. So again, turning your camera down on -1 for the sharpening helps combat that and fights against having any kind of those kind of anomalies in your footage. Contrast at -3. The reason we want to put our contrast down to -3 is so we can maintain dynamic range in the shot. Taking your contrast down to -3 protects your tonality. You know, when you've got your camera on, say, 0 or +1 or +2 on contrast, what happens is you run the risk of blowing out your whites or crushing your blacks. And what that means is when something's blown out in white, there's no information left in the pixel at all. It's solid white. When blacks are crushed, it's the exact opposite of that. The pixels are absolutely 100% saturated with information, so they are flat black, no fine details left in the footage. So having the contrast set at a -3 kind of preserves that and protects your footage from crushing the blacks or blowing out the whites, because remember, once your whites are blown out or your blacks are crushed in the footage, there's nothing you can do or I can do or anyone else can do to bring those details back. It's baked into the footage at that point. Saturation at -2. Saturation at -2 will help with the overall contrast, and it helps also with the overall blending of the tonality with the dynamic range. You can always get saturation back. That's an easy thing to put back into your footage, but oversaturated footage also runs the risk of producing artifacts in the footage. I've done this before, pushing an image a little bit too much, and all of a sudden you'll see those dancing sort of macro blocking artifacts, and that's because I'm pushing the codec too much, and the saturation is just too great for the codec to handle. So again, saturation at -2 protects the footage, and again, you can always push that up if you need to. Now, for those of you who don't want to do any kind of post-grading work, you can also use the SANDMARC profile, but I would dial everything back to 0. And do some tests of your own to see what you personally prefer. But I found that SANDMARC, with everything at 0, the sharpness is still not too crunchy, not too hot at 0. It's still pretty clean with plenty of detail, but the saturation and contrast is at a place where it looks good just straight out of the camera with no post-processing needed. The new film color profiles are pretty nice too. They are definitely color graded examples of footage. So make no mistake, these absolutely have a color grade to them. And for the most part, they're pretty subtle, so they're tastefully done. So you can do some work in post with them if you want to. But there's enough of a mood and feel to each one of these where you can easily use any of the film profiles straight out of the camera with no post-processing work needed. The A color profile, I would definitely define this as a cinematic profile. The white balance looks like it's pushed a little bit toward the red, but there's deep blues in the shadows and the sky is pretty oversaturated. The B profile is a black and white profile. If you're wanting to do something that's got a black and white feel to it, the B is great for that. The C color profile is very similar to A, but it's a little bit more toned back. It's not quite as saturated, it's not quite as vibrant. So to me, A and C kind of work hand in hand. If you want something a little bit more dramatic, go for A. If you want to pull it back a little bit toward the middle of the road, I'd go for C. The D color profile has a beautiful warm grade to it. The white balance is really pushed toward the warm colors. This would be a great color profile for say like desert shots. This almost has a Wild West look and feel to its color grade. Nice profile. The E color profile is sort of down the middle. Its white balance is pretty centered. It actually has very similar qualities to SANDMARC, the profile that I'm recommending in this video. But the E color profile does have a little bit warmer quality to it, where the SANDMARC profile seems to be a little bit more neutral. The F color profile is one of my favorites. This color profile has everything very muted. The contrast is very soft, very muted. The sky, the blues in the image are very muted and desaturated. It's got kind of heavy browns and sepia tones to them. Also, like the earlier profile, the Western kind of feel and look to that. This also has that kind of nostalgic look to it, so that would be a great color profile to use to get that kind of feeling without having to do any kind of post-processing work. The G color profile is a pretty straightforward profile. Tends to be just a little bit warm, but the blues are also a little bit oversaturated, so another profile there. So that's a great profile also if you don't want to do post-color work. The H color profile is nice because its blues are more exaggerated. Its yellows are tamed back a little bit desaturated. So again, it's another wonderful look for someone who doesn't want to do any post-color work. The I color profile is probably my favorite next to SANDMARC. And the reason is the I color profile has a very flat feel to it. It's got a very flat, desaturated look to it, but there's still plenty of color and information in there. It's slightly oversaturated compared to SANDMARC, but the I color profile kind of gives you a jump start on doing post-color work because it's just a little bit more saturated and a little bit more moody than the SANDMARC color profile. So again, that's another great profile to use even if you don't want to do color correction or any kind of post work. All of the tests with the film color profiles were shot with the same subsettings as the recommended settings that I've mentioned before. Sharpness on -1, contrast on -3, and saturation on -2. Well, that's about all I have for now, guys. I hope I've covered everything. Please leave comments below if you have any more questions. I'll try to get back to you. Stick around for a little bit if you want to see some graded examples with the SANDMARC profile. I ran these clips in an earlier video, but just in case you haven't seen them, I think they're worth taking a peek at again since this video is about best camera settings for the Phantom 4 Pro. Anyway, if you're new to my channel, please subscribe and give me a like if you don't mind. And if you want to be sure to be notified on videos when I post them, hit the little bell next to the subscribe button. That'll make sure you get an email notification anytime I upload anything new. Anyway, thanks for your time today. Thanks for watching. And hopefully I'll see you guys very soon. Have a good day.